It's okay to share what's going on. It's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And like I said, once you can admit that to yourself, it's one of the first steps towards your healing.
Hello, and welcome to the Connect podcast. This show is all about helping you connect to your soul's calling so you can take action on it. Because the sweetest success is a blend of discovering your purpose with the inner drive to bring it to life. I'm Sheila Botello, health coach, lifestyle entrepreneur, and mom of two, best known for my online wellness programs, mentoring, and self-love passion. Listen in for inspiring interviews, solo chats, and Q&A sessions that will move you past overwhelm towards what lights you up. Stop accepting good enough and go for your version of great in your health, business, and relationships. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to Interview Day on the podcast. Today's guest provides an enriching meaning to the term career pivot. Stacy-Ann Buchanan started out as a professionally trained theater and film actress in numerous theater productions, commercials, and films to her credit. In 2012, she created, produced, and launched The Mystic Effect, a creative arts show that embodies music, poetry, dance, fashion, and film. The success of the show prompted her to establish her own production company, Stacy-Ann Buchanan Productions, which led her to receiving the Entrepreneur Award at the International Women Achievement Awards. In 2015, Stacy-Ann directed and produced the award-winning documentary The Blind Stigma, which made Canadian history when it debuted as the first documentary produced in Canada that takes an in-depth look at how mental health is perceived within the Black community. The Blind Stigma is a recognized brand that has since branched out into a podcast that continues to explore such stigmas, dissect the multiple factors that aid towards mental illness in the Black community, and provide a safe space for stories to be heard. Stacy-Ann was selected as one of the 100 Black women to watch in Canada, one of the 150 Black women making Canada better, one of the 150 leading Canadians for mental health, and she presented a TEDx talk. Her body of work has firmly focused her career on challenging anti-Black systemic racism by taking holistic approaches to demystify and decolonize how mental health is perceived and addressed within the Black BIPOC communities. It's been so inspiring following Stacy-Ann's work and seeing the impact that she's creating. Our conversation went deep, and I know you're going to love it. Enjoy the episode. Stacy-Ann, welcome to the podcast. A friend recommended your podcast, The Blind Stigma, to me a few years ago.
Wow.
And I'm so glad you could be here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and my pleasure.
So since I started talking about the podcast, I certainly want to dive into, your story, where you started and where you've made your journey through and to. And I'm curious though, what made you decide to start the podcast, The Blind Stigma? And what has come from your experience of having these really powerful interviews?
Oh, that's a great question. So the podcast was branched off from the documentary of the same name, The Blind Stigma. So I created a documentary, The Blind Stigma, which focuses and centers on mental health within the Black community. Because I myself, as a self-identifying Black woman, I struggled with anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation. And I couldn't find an outlet to as a safe space to share what I was going through. And I figured out I couldn't be the only one. So even when I was diagnosed with anxiety, I thought anxiety was something was only white girls got. And coming from a theater background and a film background, I've always been one of three Black girls in my class. And all my white friends, I'll hear them talk about anxiety and anxious and the pressure of trying to keep up with work and being overexhausted, and just words that I couldn't bring home to my Jamaican Rastafarian father. So I always associated anxiety as something that white girls got, because I've never heard of another Black person ever talking about anxiety. And when I was diagnosed in 2011, at that time, it was still a foreign word. It was not something that was discussed at all, because mental illness in the Black community, and I can specifically narrow it down to the Jamaican community, is something that is very dismissive. It's something that is very much swept under the rug. purposely turning a blind eye to it, pun intended. That's why I named the documentary The Blind Stigma. And something that is used as a shame. No one wants to talk about it. So creating the podcast branched off from the documentary. I guess maybe I could share a bit as to why I created a documentary, but it's because I went through a period of suicidal ideation and depression and being anxious and not, like I said, finding an outlet to share. And the Blind Stigma, the documentary, was my healing outlet. Now, some people heal by having boundaries. Some people may heal by being in isolation. I heal by healing others. It's like when I'm teaching someone, I'm healing too.
It's beautiful.
Because I truly believe in the African proverb of each one, teach one.
I love that. I love that.
I hope that answers the question.
It does. And actually, I actually meant to start with that. I think I'd scrolled down on my questions a little far because the thing that I saw once I had listened to the podcast, of course, you reference your documentary, I went and watched it right away. And it's interesting how when you hear people's story, you may have one idea by how they present themselves, what their life must be like, how everything must just be so wonderful. You're in the public eye, you're beautiful, you have a modeling career, you have an acting career, you're, doing all of these incredible things. And yet there's these things going on inside of you that maybe you didn't feel comfortable talking about, from what it sounds like, because of the culture that you're in. And like you say, the stigma. And it really touched me because my father for years struggled with mental health. And I personally didn't know really what it was until about 6 years before he passed. And it was determined that he was bipolar. Now he was, I don't know, somewhere on the spectrum, somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, I suppose. But for years, he was on very strong medication to keep himself balanced. And there was so much I didn't understand growing up. So, the whole shift in actually talking about mental health has been really refreshing. And I also know the stigma exists in different ways and different forms,
yes,
for different cultures. But I'd love for you to share, why do you think the stigma exists as it does in your Jamaican background?
It exists. I mean, I could go as far as talking about intergenerational trauma, but I think the core of it is the embarrassment. It's the really embarrassment, because you're supposed to have your stuff together, your life together, and mental illness is sometimes seen as something demonic or something that you can pray away and read your Bible away. And by no means am I denouncing my Christian faith, but I do strongly believe, like, if you can go to a doctor for your physical well-being, then there should be a doctor that you can see for your mental well-being as well. But we're not taught that. It is immediately looked upon as crazy, and no one wants to claim crazy. No one wants to claim the crazy relative, and no one wants to claim being crazy. So it's something that is swept under the rug, and it's swept under the rug for you. So you could be struggling and you don't even know how to talk to anybody about it or where to go, because of that shame that it carries, and secrecy. And we all know that shame loves secrecy, and the fear too of what people may think, the fear of people knowing your business. It all bundles into this package of shame, secrecy, and fear. Oh, yeah. And no one wants to claim it or address it. I've often said that, we have to normalize therapy. We have to normalize talking about it. But culturally, we also have to know that not everyone has a right for access to you. And so I always say that it's always important to create a safe space. And a safe space is not necessarily just a physical space. It's a safe space within yourself. So it starts within you, because sometimes you have to admit, because a lot of us live in denial. And we kind of push and be like, no, this is nothing is wrong. I saw a study that says specifically that Black women, BIPOC women, sometimes do not think that they're struggling with anxiety or depression. They just think that they're failing. And so you keep piling on more and more and more and more and more, not knowing that strength is not defined by how much you can carry, but by what you choose to put down. And so putting it down and really taking a step and claiming what is happening to you. Like, because I always believe this, I'm sorry, I'm going off topic, that your story is never something that defines you, because we can look at our story and our story has bad parts in it, probably have horrible parts in it, great parts in it, but we can't look at it as something that is going to define you for the horrible parts in it. We got to look at it as like, it refines me, right? And when you look at it from that sense, you own it. And I've said this from day one, and I will continue to say it for every single woman. The most powerful thing that you can do is to own your story, is to own who you are, not let the media, not let your family, not let anybody dictate or narrate your own story for you. Once you own it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, it's yours. And it becomes so freeing. And so that safe space starts within you. And now creating that, and now finding someone that you can unload a bit or share a bit. That is the tricky part, but that's also the beautiful part, because there are people out there that you can create that safe space with. And I always tell my supporters, I don't really like using the word followers on social media, that they can use me as a safe space, because I know that I didn't have that. I have parents, I had a boyfriend at the time I couldn't turn to. And the safe space that was created for me, or that I saw, that I accidentally walked into, was being at a park by myself one day, just crying, just everything was just coming down. Because for me, I just felt like, as an immigrant child, I'm in the land of milk and honey. There's so much more I need to do with my life. I was turning 30 at the time, and oh my God, 30 is such a huge number and a scary number. You think that you should have everything together by 30. I should be married. I should have the kids. I should have the house, the car. And I didn't have any of that. And I put all this pressure on myself, because I feel I had to live up to the expectations of everyone else that didn't get to make it out, or all my family members that didn't get to make it out of Jamaica. And here I am in this country, and then there's so much I need to do. There's so much on my plate. There's so much money I got to make. I got to support family. I put that all on myself, right? And that was causing me a bit of distress. And I remember one day sitting in the park crying, being overwhelmed, and a stranger walked up to me and asked me what was wrong. And she provided that safe space, in that I unloaded everything that was going on, but she didn't really say a word. And she created a space that was void of judgment. So I didn't need to hear, but you have a job, but you have a roof over your head. There's so many things to be grateful for. Yes, we know that when a person is struggling. Yes, you know that. But please acknowledge what I'm going through. My struggles are my struggle. There's no need to compare struggles or to dismiss my struggle. And so she provided that space for me, a non-judgmental air, where I could just let out all my fears and let out everything that was going on. And for the time being, I'm going so much off topic. I use strangers as my safe space, because strangers provide that space where they don't know you. They don't know your name unless you really tell them. And so because I was still living in shame and fear and guilt, like if I told you my name or something, maybe you're going to tell the whole world. But it created a safe space where I didn't have to worry about if you're going to travel back or share my business with anyone else. That was a whole mouthful.
That is the story that we need to hear. The story that, you're moving through all of that pressure, self-imposed and imposed on just maybe the people around you, or even perceived by seeing others around you who seemingly have it all together as well. And I guess, as you mentioned, intergenerational trauma, that is where the pressure comes from. Like you said it, here you are needing to prove yourself, needing to make it happen because there are others who haven't been able to. And that takes a lot of energy. And that takes, it can feel impossible, I'm sure. So what a release that you were able to find in sharing that with someone, like you said, that you didn't know, so you could just kind of release it. And how did it feel when you did that?
It felt amazing. It felt like I just had the whole world just taken off my shoulders. And so because I found comfort and I found safety in talking to strangers, I started telling strangers a lot, talking to more strangers. And naturally, I gravitate towards strangers. I'm a people's person, right? And I love sparking conversations. I love talking. I love sharing ideas, experiences. It's something that I do. So naturally, but being in a state of a funk and being able to share was something that that really helped, that really and truly helped me 100%. So I kept on using strangers as therapy. And I also want to say something too, like during a period when I was going through my depression came in two waves, so we know the depression that, I'm at home, the blinds are closed, I'm not showering for days, I'm not brushing my teeth for days, I'm not washing the dishes, I'm either not eating or eating myself silly. We all recognize that form of depression, right? But there's also the other form of depression, which is the smiling depression that I went through as well, where my hair was laid, my makeup was slayed, my outfit was like from like a 10, 10, 10. And like I was going out and partying and drinking because I know I was sick on the inside. I forced and faked a facade of happiness because I felt like if I fake that I'm happy, if I pretended that I'm happy, then the distress or the pain or whatever I'm feeling on the inside will go away. And so many times we tend to think that the person who's depressed or who's sad generally keeps to themselves, don't want to come out. But sometimes we don't recognize that it's the friend right next to you. Yep. It's the friend that every day gets up and gives you the happy good morning quotes, or constantly posting on social media, or constantly cheering you up. Sometimes we don't realize like those are the ones that need the love and the care and the space to talk as much. Because when you look at Robin Williams and you look at his story, he was a comedian, and a lot of comedian, it has been proven, a lot of them struggle with depression, and because they know what pain is like and because they know what sadness is like, they make sure that they make people laugh.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I just want the audience or whoever is listening just to know that, it's okay to not mask your pain. It's okay. It's okay to share what's going on. It's okay to not be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And like I said, once you can admit that to yourself, it's one of the first steps towards your healing. So I went through that period too, where, the hashtag, I think the hashtag best life wasn't out yet, but I was living like, this is like claiming best life ever,
mm-hmm.
when I was really struggling and going home every day wanting to die, but hoping that if I faked being happy, somehow I will be happy.
Oh, yes. And with those types of experiences, having come through it, it must have, now that you've moved through it and you're now advocating and talking about it, you must have a certain sense of compassion for so many different people from so many different walks because you've been there. And you said something interesting, the idea of that person next to you could be experiencing it, you just don't know. It's like that feeling of carrying each other's burdens and speaking it out loud like you did at the park that day with that stranger. It does release things and it shows you what is possible. And it actually helps you feel like maybe there is hope for something better to come because you have this sense of release. I love that you turned that painful experience into something that could help others, that has really extended to touch so many people's lives through the documentary, through the podcast, through the various speaking engagements you've had. And the fact that even in your everyday life, you're on the lookout, you can see you're able to share your story, even one-on-one with someone to possibly help them. So what led up to that time? Had you been modeling already, and had you started, you'd been doing theater as well at the time, or was that after the fact?
No, I've always been doing theater. I've always been doing film, and I was modeling at the time. At the time when I discovered I was struggling with anxiety, I'd actually moved to Vancouver to pursue an acting career. Okay. And it was in Vancouver that I got diagnosed because I'd given myself 6 months to make it. I'm like, I'm going to be as successful as Halle Berry. We share the same birthday, so we should share the same success. And it was I'd put a time on success, and I tell people don't ever do that, because your journey is your journey and it's not a journey to compare, right? And of course I was living that life where I compared a lot. Comparison is the thief of joy. It really is. And so I was living in that state where I felt like I had to compare my life to my friends from college, from film school, who were doing amazing. And I'm like, when is it my turn? So it's like I put so much pressure on myself.
Yes, that is
And
6 months is not a long time. I
yeah,
guess, yeah, it's interesting how you can put a timeline on there and think, okay, here we go. And yet something so much bigger has come from this whole experience for you that you never would have imagined.
Yeah, I remember my dad was saying to me, he's like, you've always wanted to be on film and TV and radio, and now you're doing it, but just from a different outlet. When the documentary came out, it made Canadian history because it was the first documentary produced in Canada that talked about mental health in the Black community specifically. Amazing. It came out, it premiered to a sold out audience. And it propelled my career from an actress model into a filmmaker, producer, and TEDx speaker, documentary filmmaker, and more importantly, a title that I hold dear to my heart, a mental health advocate, which I'm slowly transitioning into a mental health coach. But it's interesting. It's interesting how you can sit back and you can view your life and you can make your plans. You can really make your plans. But there's a saying that man makes plans and God laughs. And I really love it, because you can make all the plans you want, but you just don't know, right? And the beauty of it is to go with the flow rather than try to resist. It's quite interesting. Really I feel like I'm trying to put things together, but I just know in that state, in 2011, 2012, so many things that I was fighting for and so many things that I wanted. And now to look what I have compared to what I was fighting for, it's nothing, because it's almost, the plans are so much bigger.
I wonder what would have happened in terms of your understanding the mental health struggles that you were having if things had gone according to your original plan, right? You think, okay, you succeeded in 6 months and off to the races we go. And the life of an actor, very, very busy if your career is taking off, right? And would there be time to really address those mental health issues? So yeah, I'm sure it's interesting when you think about what could have been and what is, and you may not have uncovered it for quite some time.
No, and I'm glad, I'm happy the way things turned out. It's not what I truly wanted, but it's what I needed. And being in this path is just, in this journey, in this chapter of my life, it's so beautiful as things unravel, and as a mental health advocate too, as I'm learning more about my body, learning more about my triggers, learning more about my traumas and healing. That's also really important, because it's also putting me in a position to want to know more. I mean, mental health is not something that it's just a one day thing or a 1 week thing. It's a continuous thing. And I have to practice what I preach, so even I'm telling people to take care of themselves, I have to make sure that I am taking care of myself too, that I am definitely taking the rest that is needed, and not thinking that rest is something that I can just schedule in, knowing that it is a priority. It is something that is my birthright and that is needed, and not to push myself, because to be honest with you, I talk about the two forms of the depression, but there's also the two forms of anxiety, which I struggle with both. What I was going through when I was first diagnosed with anxiety, it was a typical anxiety, the rushing, the heart beating fast, the constant need to just feel like your adrenaline is keep on going. But there's another form of it, which is the high functioning anxiety, which I experienced when my career was taking off after the film, and I was getting lots of speaking engagements and things were happening for me. I was in a position where I felt like I couldn't say no to any quote unquote opportunity. And I kept going and going and going, when that is a form of anxiety, because you can't slow down. You don't know how to slow down. You're constantly saying yes. You feel like you're people pleasing all the time, because you just have to, it's an opportunity. You have to do this. And I only recognized that fact about myself in 2020 when COVID happened and we were forced to stay home. We couldn't go anywhere. And my heart rate was just like, I need to do something. I felt like I need to do something. What project am I going to do on? This is slowing things down. My daughter's turning 1. I'm planning a big party for her. What do I need to do? And I realized I was spiraling out of control. And I literally had to go to my washroom and practice cognitive behavioral therapy on myself and talk to myself and literally name my anxiety, because I was like, I can't function. Like, you're going like this. And thank you. Her name is Michelle, by the way. Thank you for being a huge coach in my success. But right now is a time for rest. And we can't do anything. And we need each other in order to function. As silly as I talk about it, it's not silly, but no. I've shared this in an interview with CBC. And the producer came back to me a week later and said that her son struggled so much with anxiety. And she told him to name your anxiety. Yeah. And she's like, Stacy-Ann, it works. Because I don't think people understand how healthy it is to have conversations with yourself.
Very, very healthy.
Yeah.
I actually named I call it my amygdala, that voice, the voice that's there. I call her Gilda. And my son calls his Bubbles.
Oh, wow.
Because, for me, it's often the voice, the ridiculousness of what this voice has to say about, always pointing back to everything that doesn't work and what could go wrong. And so my son was like, well, Bubbles. I'm like, well, that's hysterical. How can you take that voice seriously now?
Yes.
So being able to name it though, and to talk to it, because it is not you. I've heard emotions are like clouds and they pass. And it's not that we should not acknowledge the emotion that we may be feeling. It's just knowing it's not going to be forever. And so naming it is acknowledging it. That's so powerful. And how wonderful you were able to help that young boy.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I keep telling people, you have to have healthy conversations with yourself. It's not something to deem as crazy. And I don't like that word, because I realized the stigma of that word and the power of that word and the silencing of that word. So as a mental health advocate, I had to reevaluate my vocabulary and the things that I say, and how they can be impactful. But in a sense, when we think about speaking to ourselves, it's always listed, or it's always in this category of you're insane. When really and truly, we need to create healthy conversation and healthy boundaries with ourselves. Yes. You can have, you have the voices in your head, you have the inner critic, and you have your inner coach. Mm-hmm. And it's like, which one is taking precedent today? Which one are you going to silence? Which one do you know? Okay, I don't need this, right? Which one are you going to nurture?
Yeah. And which one is going to allow you to celebrate those moments as well, and to say, hey, I'm proud of you, right? Because we need to be proud of ourselves for the big and really the little things we do every day. If we really are to practice gratitude, part of that is also being proud of those ways that we showed up for our dreams, showed up for the loves in our life, showed up as the person we wanted to be, because too often that inner critic is so loud and constantly talking to us about all the things we're not doing right. We actually need to step up our game on the inner coach.
Yeah, thank you. And I often tell this to folks. It's really important and so nurturing, because it also sets the tone for self-love. And when we talk about self-love, it's something that is romanticized, and it's something that is thrown around a lot. And we don't understand that self-love is not just taking the bubble baths and having the champagne and saying, I'm going to eat caviar and go on a $2,000 shopping spree and call it self-love. It's also showing yourself compassion and extending grace and being appreciative of yourself and your journey. There's levels to self-love, and it's not the easiest task, especially as a woman, especially when you have the media, social media, whatever it is, telling you that, you need to fix this, or you need to tuck this, you need to cut that, or you need to perk this up, or what beauty is, or how you should feel about yourself, and how easy it is to compare yourself to people's lives on social media, because you see their highlight reels, right? Because that's all we really put out is our highlight reels, and all of this pressure that we go through. And we really think that the self-love is this part where it's like, you put on the makeup, you get your hair done, and this is me loving myself. No, it's extending grace. It's forgiving yourself. It's technically easier to forgive someone than to actually forgive yourself, because you constantly live in the past and you keep beating yourself up of what could have, should have, could have been, would have been. And there's so much to unravel there. So self-love, it's not a marathon. It is a journey. Mm-hmm. It is a journey. And I want to preach that to women consistently, because there's so much that comes or comes in our way, that we're living in a patriarchal world, right? And there's so much, we're here to give so much of ourselves and to serve. And once you take a step back, like for instance, one thing I did in my life a few years ago, which was one of the most honorable thing and boldest thing I've ever done, was to do a solo travel, right? And I solo traveled, and I went to Europe, I did the Caribbean, and I went to the States, did some parts, and it's just like, it was so incredible to me because I've never done that before. But I realized, like, stepping away, how much of myself I give away to others. Mm. And I always encourage it. And I'm like, if it's not something that you can afford, if it's not something that you can do, even if you solo traveled for a day, a few hours, be a tourist in your city, just step back and look at how much of yourself that you give away. Mm-hmm. And fill your cup up, because I think we're naturally, that natural instinct for a woman is to constantly pour into others, your mother, your wife, your cousin, your sister, your all of this title that you have to play, and you're constantly pouring into others and forgetting to pour into yourself. And maybe I'm going off topic with this, but
not at all, because I was going to talk about boundaries, and you've basically covered that. And I think it's so important, as you say, for us to realize that there may be that element within us that is the nurturer. And it's on a spectrum for all women, right? Some are more nurturing than others, like in their personality. And yet, as you said, it's been baked into society that women are to hold this role and to do the emotional work and to make sure to show up and smile and look great and make sure everybody's got what they need and everything's tasting good. And right, it's a lot of pressure. And when it really should be just shared across both genders or all the genders. And for us to be able to spot that allows us to see what boundaries do we need to put in place. And you're a mom, you have a little girl, you have a busy career. And so how do you handle your boundaries with all the different roles that you take on?
I used to think that the key word to handling boundaries or handling like all the different roles I have is to balance. I really used to think that way. The art of it is to balance. But in order to balance something, right, when you think of the scale and you think of a scale and you put 1 pound on this and a half a pound on that, it's not balanced. So in order for it to balance, you have to have 1 pound on the left side and 1 pound on the right side. That is going to create that balance that you need. And as a mother, as a partner, as a businesswoman, as a coworker, as all these titles, as a sister, daughter, all these titles that I have, it's very difficult for me to put the same percentage into every role every single day. So I can't balance, because that isn't creating balance. There's no way, like, and every mother can say this, that there's one day, okay, every single day is not a 100%. Going to this is my mother cloak. because like sometimes we forget that it's us too. Like we forget that we are who we are because all those other roles have defined us, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to put 100% in my work and then 100% into motherhood and 100% into my partner and 100. I can't. It's impossible. So
That's
I like
what
to think of it as,
perfectionism is, right? It's
right,
like
and it eats
expecting
at
that we
you.
can do it all. And that's just not at all
No,
possible.
it is not. It's not even sustainable. It's not healthy. So when we're thinking about healthy and creating boundaries and all of that, I think of the term harmony.
Oh.
And I like to extend grace to myself when I say, today I didn't show up 100% in this field, but who says that showing up means that you have to be full? Showing up means that you could be half full, you could be a quarter full, you could be over full. Showing up means different things. Yeah. And so when I create this harmony in my life, then everything makes sense, because the key word too is extending the grace to myself and not beat myself up. Especially as a mom, we can beat ourselves up so much because we didn't mommy it enough today. We didn't do, so it's just like, I had to extend grace to myself and know that every day I am doing my best. And that is all that matters. But I cannot put 100% into every single role or show up for 100% and do the balancing thing. I like to live my life in harmony, because that way it creates the space. It makes way for this beautiful space that I need in my life in order for me to grow as well.
Absolutely. And you talk also about hustle culture, shifting it into something called alignment culture.
Oh my God, the hustle culture.
it's so connected, right? It's that getting rid of the perfection and moving into something that is like aligned, as you say, that you're showing up, and we're going to show up differently every day, especially as we're raising families, we're in different seasons of our life, you're starting a business, and it takes different energy levels at different phases of each thing. So I'm curious to know from you how you have been able to live this alignment way with all the different things that you have on the go. And as you're sharing about that, what would you say to someone who has a really busy life and is actually wanting to start a business, maybe on the side, or transition out of a career into a business? How do they do it in a way that feels aligned and that actually feels doable?
Sure. You can look at the term, like I talked about with balancing, and understanding that showing up doesn't mean that you have to be full every day, and to still extend that grace to yourself. I've also realized that the key to success, my personal opinion, is peace, inner peace and peace. Once I have that, I am good. I used to think the key to success is having all the money in the bank and the car, the husband, the kids, all of that stuff, the house, everything like that. That's what it looks like. But you can have all of that and not have peace and sleep at nights, right? You can have all of that and still be in turmoil or be in distress and not feeling good or within yourself. So the key for me is having peace. And peace comes with also meditating. Peace comes with stripping myself away from not comparing myself to anyone, but comparing myself to yesterday, and how I can be better for myself and for my future self to thank me tomorrow. When I put peace at the top of everything in my life, it then makes me understand that I don't have to hustle. I don't have to chase anymore. I don't have to chase fame. I don't have to chase money. I don't have to chase anyone, because it will all come to me. So once I put myself in a position to know that peace is my birthright, rest is my birthright, abundance is my birthright, everything that I want is going to come to me, it then allows me to align myself. So it also creates a space where I can say no. As a former member of the Queen of Hustle and the hustle culture, do you know how hard it is to say no? Because you feel like every yes is going to lead to a bigger opportunity. So it's easier for me to say no, it doesn't serve me, or no, this doesn't align with my career right now, or no, like what you think is an opportunity is not an opportunity for me. It's not the easiest word to come by, It's just not the easiest word to put in my vocabulary. It wasn't, but it comes with so much peace. Because so many times we say yes to a job, and you say yes to the job because it's going to pay you the 6 figures or 7 figures, whatever it is. And it's so stressful and it's killing you. It's called stress money. I don't want any more stress money. I don't. Like so many times we say yes to something and deep down you don't want to do it, but you say yes because you think of the money. And I think if you live your life with an alignment culture, then you can tell yourself, like, I don't chase anything. Everything just flows to me. And so you allow things to flow to you. And you also know, and this is something that I've told this to myself, I've told this to my girlfriends, that there's no such thing as a missed opportunity.
Right.
Because what is meant for me will never, ever miss me. Never.
Yeah. I love that so much. And what a beautiful way of dispelling the fear that comes up. The fear of a missed opportunity, the fear of not doing it right, the fear of not showing up in the way that we think we should. This is the peaceful way, is living in alignment. And you have beautiful boundaries. I've loved being in communication with you over this last little while as we've been setting up this conversation. And I see how you care for yourself and the loves in your life. And I see where your boundaries are. And it just makes me happy. And it makes me want to connect with you even more. Right. So the whole, like, when it's like, oh, gee, I don't want to say no to anything. If anything, I love it when I see someone who has strong boundaries. It makes me realize that I have so much to learn from them. So that's really beautiful. And I feel like this is something that myself and our listeners can really take away and practice, is looking at those areas of their life and saying, well, where am I chasing? Where do I need to step back and let things come to me?
Yes.
Because it's so opposite to the way we've been socialized. It's so opposite to the scarcity mentality. It's totally opposite to abundance, when we know there is abundance everywhere. Yes. And I love that you embrace that as well.
Absolutely.
Oh,
absolutely.
So
I have to. These are things that, I have to coach into myself. I have to tell myself that, or else I'm just going to live with the constant fear mindset of the hustle culture, because it really is a hustle culture. It's really fear that's in that mindset, because you're just keep chasing every single day. Just keep chasing the dollar every single day. You keep chasing the opportunity every single day because of fear of missing out, fear of that you're going to miss something. It's a fear. It's a fear. You're living in that mindset of fear. And I don't want to live in that mindset anymore, because it does not serve me. So I have to think about things that actually serve me, and in thinking that way too, I do understand that as humans we're put here to serve each other, whether it's serving you with my perspective or changing your perspective, or sharing my story in order, because I believe that everybody's story could be a blueprint for someone else's story. Like your story can help somebody's life, save their life, or help them improve, right? It's serving as a part of sharing. And I truly think that if we all put ourselves in this beautiful mindset that we're here to just serve and help each other, it makes things a little bit easier. I know for myself, it does.
It does for me as well. And it's why I love podcasts. And it's why I love this venue of being able to share people's stories, because, like I said earlier, we see ourselves in elements of other people's story. It makes us not feel alone. It makes us feel like there's hope, like something's possible.
Yes.
And as you're talking, I just imagine the beautiful conversations you have with your daughter and teaching her the things you're learning. And how old is she now?
She's 3.
Oh my gosh. And already she's just steeped in it. And just imagine, Stacy-Ann, what's going to happen for this little girl.
I know. I laugh because she's in that mindset of everything is mine. It's mine, especially being, and it's like when I talk to other moms or like moms that have older kids, they're like, yeah, this age is like, it's very territorial. They claim everything. And so it's just like, and when she threw her tantrums, I have to like hold her hand. Like the other day we were in the park and she wanted to be in the swing, and she likes when I swing her, when I push really hard. She loves going up really high. And, she got in the swing and I'm pushing her, like building momentum, and she's crying because I'm too slow. I'm not pushing her as high as I was like, no, you have to build momentum. You can't just go full speed. It takes time. Just wait. We're going to get there. you know, and she wanted me to keep going. And I was just so tired. And I took her out and she's crying. And I stooped down with her, you know, just to be on her level. And I just held her and I said, "Friends, can you just take some deep breaths?" And she took some deep breaths and she goes, and then she looked at me for a bit and she paused and she took one more. I'm like, "Are you better now?" She was like, "Yes, I'm better now, mommy." Oh. You know, so I'm teaching her to like collect her thoughts, because like when toddlers get really, really angry, I mean, they're trying to process their emotions. Their emotions are bigger than them. And so they're trying to process it, and it comes out in different ways. So you can't really get upset when they throw these temper tantrums, because they're only trying to deal with it the best way they can. And so I taught her from like a year ago to really just step back and to breathe. And also words of affirmation. One of her favorites is, "I am brave. I am strong. I am tough, and I'm more than enough." So she learned most of that from dance class, and I added in the "I am brave" thing. So whenever she gets into moments where she feels like she's scared, I remind her to say, you know, "I am brave." And like, I'll tell you a story. So we went on vacation last week. We did a mommy and me vacation. It's something that before she was born, I told my partner that I wanted to create a bond with my daughter where I want us to go on vacation together, just us together once a year, you know? And so we took that trip to Jamaica, and she's scared of buses. You know, here in Toronto, I drive all the time. So she loves automobiles. She doesn't play with dolls. She plays with helicopters and trucks and everything. She loves automobiles. So she'll like, whenever she see a bus or a streetcar, she knows how to name them. She even knows what a excavator is, and I didn't even know what that was. It was like a truck that digs up the dirt. I'm like, I didn't even know what that was. But she loves to name cars and stuff. But when we went to Jamaica, we had to take a tour bus, like a huge bus, to get to her hotel. And she came out of the airport. You know, at first I thought the heat was going to get to her, but it was all these big, loud buses, waiting to take all the tourists to the resort. And she was freaking out. It was just too much for her. She was crying. She was shaking. And I, in that moment, I had the bags, I had the stroller, you know, one of the bus drivers, one of the conductors of the bus came and like put my stuff away, and we're trying to get her on the bus, and she's crying, and I'm hugging her. And I told her, "Remember the words, you know, I am brave, I am strong." And she said it, and she took her first step, and she went up. And then people in the bus, because we were the last two to get on the bus, so they were waiting for us to come on the bus for them to go and enjoy their vacation. So they were waiting for us, and people were encouraging her, you know, even telling her, "You want me to play Cocomelon for her? Do you want me to do something?" But she repeated those words, and she took those 3 big steps onto the bus, and the whole bus erupted, started clapping her and cheering for her. And she's like, yay, because she's just such a bowl of joy. She honestly, she exudes joy. She's joy personified, and I'm so blessed. And she's walking down the aisle, because our seats were towards the end, and everyone's giving her a high five. And I'm like, I'm walking behind a little rock star where everyone's giving her a high five because she did it. They saw her fear, the fear that consumed her. They saw how she was, and she repeated her little mandate or mantra or affirmations, and she got on that bus. And I was just like, I was just so touched, you know. But yeah, I share that because it's important to see. Because sometimes I wish I had the version of me. Sometimes I wish I knew this version years ago, but I guess I wouldn't have this version if I wouldn't be who I am if I was like this already. So I had to grow, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and what a beautiful gift for her. Hopefully she'll remember that, because 3 years old, sometimes kids will remember. Like my teenagers don't remember a whole lot. Pictures, they remember pictures.
Yes.
When they look back, they'll take back. But my goodness, I can't imagine her forgetting something like that, because that is what a beautiful way to also see, hey, I can move through and be brave and courageous in new situations, and people are rooting for me. I'm just so thrilled for you to be experiencing motherhood. It is an incredible gift to have children, and you are doing amazing things in the world, and you're working now, as you said, moving into mental health coaching. I think that is so beautiful And
Thank
just
you.
imagining the lives who are going to be touched by your care, your experience, your story, and really you're creating space for them to process what
Yes.
they're going through and the tools you
Yes.
have to offer. I would love for you to share with listeners where they can find and follow you, and also anything that's coming up that they can be on the lookout for.
Sure. You can find me all over social media at Stacy-Ann Buchanan. So there's no E in the Stacy. And sometimes Instagram may or may not let you find me without putting, there's a hyphen in between my name. Um, I use the same name for everything. Anything coming up? There's things that I'm working on, but to be honest with you, I'm also giving myself time to rest because I feel like I missed out on a lot of years of not resting. For 3 years I remember working on a TV show, working on Star Trek actually, and I was doing 14 hours a day. And even when my daughter was born, I went back when she was 3 months old, and my mom was here to help us out. And that really took a toll on my body. After a while, I realized like I hustled too much for a very long time that I didn't really understand that I could do nothing and it's okay.
Yes. It is
And that's
okay.
okay. It's okay. So I'm looking into more resting and more vacation time that's coming up, but knowing that I do have things on the rise. Like I have been writing a book since 2020, and I just have to extend grace to myself too. But I want to finish the book because it's a book for women, designed for women, and it's just ways to help us grow. Because I've also been studying my audience and studying what area is I'm more drawn to, or it's drawn to me. And like I study my posts, and I study how they are received. And
Yes.
I feel like it's the area of going into to helping and healing women is a journey that I've been scared of for a very long time. And but I'm ready for it, because like I never want to be, honestly, Sheila, I never want to be the person that says I'm going to empower women and take advantage of that. Because I know there's so many women that are looking to be empowered and looking for ways not to find their voice, because we all have a voice, but ways to amplify their voice. And I know I've been in stages where I have been taken advantage of, and I never want to do that. So in order to bring forth what I'm going to do, I really want to come from it from a place of healing, because I can't say healed, because we're always healing, right? It's
Right.
not linear. It's not like it's always going around in a circle. And a
Yes.
space where I can really truly touch women and really connect and create that space where we all feel seen and heard. That's really important to me, because I sometimes dread that women empowerment can look at a stage where you're only empowering a certain woman or a certain status of woman, and not everyone is feeling empowered, And I know I can't speak for everyone, but I just want to create a space where everyone feels seen and heard, and yeah, where it creates joy and that form of like, okay, I can get up and I can do this. I know I'm not really making sense per se, but women have been taken advantage of for so many centuries, and I don't want to be one of those.
I don't
It's
think
hard.
you
I
could
just
ever do
don't.
that. You have such a pure heart, and you've come through
Thank
so much
you.
as well. And because that's your intention, I don't think it's possible that can happen, in my
Thank
opinion.
you.
And I'm really excited about this book that you're writing, and we'll have to make sure to have you back on when you're on the circuit, on the media circuit, to promote it, because I love, as you say, to amplify the voices of people who are
Yes.
raising up others, who
Mhm.
are putting a beautiful message of healing and of a different way of being into the
Yes.
world. And you're doing a beautiful job of it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I'm so grateful you could be here. And I'm going to make sure that I put all of your links in the show notes so people can find you, follow what's going on in your world, and read some of your posts on Instagram, for instance. Like the captions are so deep and nourishing. I have a whole bunch of them
Thank you.
saved. I like to go back to
Oh,
from time to time because they
thank
really touch
you.
my heart. So I'm just really grateful that you are doing the work that you're doing and that you have listened to the call, because it sounds like this really is a
Yeah,
calling
it
in your
is.
life.
It really is. Yes, it definitely is. Because, like I said, like when you're called to do what you're supposed to do, you will get uncomfortable, because now is the time. You got to pick up that call. The phone will not stop ringing till you pick it up. So,
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we'll be sure to be in touch soon.
yes, thank you for having me.
And everyone who's listening, thank you so much for being here. And we would love to know how this interview resonated for you and what you're taking away from this conversation today. There's so much to be learned from someone who has walked through certain experiences. And I know that we are all much more alike than we can imagine. So please, as you're listening to this, feel free to follow along Stacy-Ann Buchanan on Instagram and her other channels. Share this episode with those that you care about, and we will see you on another episode. Big blessings. Thank you so much for being here with me on the Connect podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with someone you think would enjoy it. Also, if you head over to iTunes to leave a review, I'd be so grateful. Let us know what your favorite parts were and what you'd like to hear more of. It will help us have a greater impact, elevating many more people to grow and succeed together. See you next time.